Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Fauna by Christiane Vadnais, translated by Pablo Strauss, published by Coach House Books. My name is James Lindsay. I am the Sales and Marketing Coordinator at Coach House. Thank you all very much for coming this evening. Yeah, it's a strange time, so thank you all for making the time to come here and see this and celebrate the launch of a very amazing book, a work of interesting interconnected fictions about climate change, a scary book, an important book, a page turner, if I may be so bold. Yeah, I'm just going to jump right into it. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We are hosting this event from Toronto, so we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with Mississaugas of the Credit. Before I introduce Pablo and Christiane, I just want to introduce them and who they are. Christiane Vadnais holds a MFA in creative writing and has long been active an events programmer and project manager in Quebec's literary community. Radio Canada named her a young author to watch for 2020. Fauna is her first work of fiction. She lives in Quebec City. And Pablo Strauss, what can I say about Pablo Strauss? His previous translations for Coach House include the amazing The Country Will Bring Us No Peace, The Supreme Orchestra, and Bologna. He is a two-time finalist for the Governor General's Literary Award for translation. Pablo grew up in Victoria, BC, and has lived in Quebec City for 15 years. I know we can't hear you, but please, everyone, put your hands together for Pablo and Christiane. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for those beautiful words
I introduced
about
Pablo
Fauna and Pablo.
yeah, I introduced Pablo too early, I realized. So Pablo, you can stick around anyways. But what we're going to do for this evening is first Christiane's going to treat us to a reading from Fauna. And Pablo, he's going to hang tight with me here. But then we're all going to have a little discussion afterwards about translation and Fauna itself. So take it away, Christiane.
Yes. So thank you very much for being here. I can see you, but I'm here in my haunted little castle where I'm doing a residency in Eastern Quebec. And I'm really pleased to read you an excerpt of the first story in Fauna. We'll talk about the book after, but for now, let me just introduce you to Shivering Heights, the little village where some of the stories takes place, and Heather, my weird witch from Shivering Heights. So here it comes. In Shivering Heights, life is an enigma of water and sky. Rain is frequent. Some days, it falls in perfectly formed pearls or drops home to a knife's point, leaving nothing visible beyond and no prospect of escape. But there is a peace of sorts at the heart of a downpour so precious and violent. On other days, the showers mist down like gossamer, enveloping forests and outcroppings, snouts and claws. Then the river gains the upper hand, forces merger, and highlights the delicate invasiveness of the rains. As Agnes and Heather, the stubborn young women, sink into the scalding baths of the Nordic spa, the air begins to turn to rain. All around in faraway mountains and up in tree branches and under the earth in warrens and dens, creatures great and small get ready for the coming downpour. The women are content to watch the fog twist and knot itself before their eyes, hiding and revealing snatches of landscape. I love water, says Heather suddenly. Though it's pointless, she paddles her arms like fins to stay in place. You'll see. We'll be completely new women after this, she rasps. Submerged in turquoise water in the middle of the mountains, Agnes still feels like the stagnant, lethargic woman she has become at work. She inhales to take in the moment and hold it tightly in her lungs and stomach, but it seems to be constantly dissipating. Are you from around here? She finally asks. Not really. You? I needed to get far away from work. A little laugh pierces the fog. You came to the right place. We're far away from everything here. Heather's voice shifts strangely between deep and high-pitched, but she doesn't seem to care and shoves her head under the water. Agnes finds this young woman's forthrightness dizzying. Such lightness inhabits her every move, her very being, as she dives right into the shallowest section of the water and out again, and traverses the pool with the ease of an undine. This might all seem less strange if Agnes weren't emerging from a drawn-out corporate restructuring. In recent months, she's laid off so many people that their tears and sobs have come to seem more normal than the beatific, almost unsettling joy emanating from the bather beside her. The two women spend the following day in the spa's many pools, sweating or shivering, shedding dead skin. Without other guests to welcome, the owner leaves them to their own devices, then stops appearing altogether. Eager for new experiences, Heather slips into every bath, try out the hammam and the sauna. Agnes becomes less disconcerted, learns to be still. Like the herons that sometimes come to rest in the spa in Shivering Heights, or the black bass riding the river's current. She'll drink and eat and wait, soaking wet, for the day to pass. Her muscles will relax. Her breathing will slow down. Little by little, the downpour smudges out the borders between spa and forest. In the afternoon, seams of muck seep down from the undergrowth in small furrows, extending their black tentacle into adjacent pools. Under the cover of rainfall, Heather strips off her bikini top and throws it skyward. She swims easily with precise strokes, but there is something forced about the way she stands, erect, shoulders thrust back, streaming water accentuating the contrast between her muscular body and soft, full breasts. Loosen up, Agnes, we're the only ones here. She lifts up her arms to redo her ponytail. As her chest thrusts out and lips part to reveal her small, pointy teeth, her wide-apart eyes gaze at Agnes, who looks away. In Shivering Heights, the ambient humidity obscures vision. Drop by drop, it distills its musty aroma. Agnes reluctantly undoes her bikini straps and dives right back into breaststroke position. Heather's strange lightness is both seductive and somehow disconcerting. You have a great body, she hears through the splashing. Agnes wishes she could be left cold by the sight of Heather's dappled skin, whose suppleness accentuates her bone structure and musculature, or the athletic stomach scored by the thin, glistening line of a scar. But shivers run down her legs and arms. She suddenly feels an invasive presence in the cold water and another, even more sinister beyond. She grabs a towel and heads toward a distant yurt, almost hidden by the trees. From the corner of her eye, she sees Heather flapping in the water, then shedding the final patch of color, her bikini bottom. Occupied by even the most trivial things, the human mind can stay calm. That's what they say, or at any rate, what Agnes's therapist believes. That's why she booked a stay at this spa. Stretched out in a hammock that encloses her like a cocoon, Agnes focuses on the crackling of the fire in the center of the room, The squeals in the distance every time Heather is shocked by the steaming hot pool or icy cold river, and the points of light that dance inside her eyelids when they close. After a few minutes, she falls asleep. In her dream, Agnes is back in the fog. She sees ill-defined animal shapes, a forest of pinwheeling silhouettes brushing up against each other. Deer, foxes, elongated creatures that are neither gutter snakes nor worms emerge from the vaporous mass and slither off into the waters. She sees them swarming together in a writhing knot, a floating viper's nest that morphs into a woman whose pale, transparent skin reveals bones and veins and the blood circulating through her body. This infrared apparition opens its mouth unnaturally wide, exposing its skull. Agnes is drawn to the gaping chasm, as if pulled by a magnetic force she can possibly resist, toward this opening as wide as a storm drain. When her eyes open and her arms thrust out into the pitch dark when they find no hold, Agnes discerns that she has seen these girls through nature. A spasm runs over her body. Then she wakes. The ceiling above her is worn, cracked, water-spotted. When she gets out of the hammock, the wood smoke makes her cough. Through the window, she can see Heather singing to herself, dropping a towel over her shoulder and putting on her flip-flops. Above, the rainstorm marshals its forces. Voilà, as we say in French.
Good job.
That was wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Christiane. I remember reading that when I first read this, reading that story and just automatically getting chills from it. It really sets up the rest of the book. That was incredible. Thank you so much. That was from the very first section, Diluvium, which is just amazing. You can already feel the tension that just runs through the entire book. Before we go on, I just want to mention to everyone who's watching to stick around to the end, because we do have a special discount code for the book that I'll be telling you about. And you can be able to get 25% off, which I would really recommend you take the chance to pick this up while you can. But now I'll just launch into some questions. Christiane, the first question I have is for you. So you were reading from this, which is a translation of your book, which was originally written in French. What is it like to read your translated work? Does it still feel like your own work, your own words?
I would say yes and no. It's an amazing experience because you recognize your story, your words, but at the same time, it's a little bit strange because it's not it. And when I read Pablo's translation, it felt very vibrant to me and very light. And I saw my novel from another point of view. So I found it fantastic. I really like the translation. And I feel a little bit like it's another interpretation of what the title in French is Fauna. So I feel like Fauna is like another interpretation, as in music, when you give another touch to a piece. I think my voice is like, I don't know how to say, completed by Pablo's voice, and it's a new work. And yeah, it was really amazing. I like to travel, and it's so amazing to know that my book will travel, since I can't right now. So yeah, it was a beautiful experience.
That's a great way of thinking about it. And Pablo, I have a similar question for you too. Like, that's fascinating. You mentioned music, Christiane, because it's almost like a Glenn Gould variation on it, right? Like his own take on a very standard piece. So Pablo, what drew you to Fauna originally, and how do you compare your translation with the original? Did they seem like the same thing to you at all?
Yeah, I really like the kind of Christiane's analogy about a musical performance, or even thinking of it like a cover song sort of. And I'm definitely a translator who doesn't really stick word to word exactly and likes to change a bit more. And I think you need to think of it like a really good cover song often will be very different than the original, but somehow faithful to its spirit. So what drew me to Phone and made me really want to translate it was the writing, especially Christiane writes beautiful sentences. And as soon as I read it, as soon as I started reading like the first paragraph, it's describing like fog, which is skulking on the ground, and it just sets this kind of very terrifying ambiance in just a quick paragraph, and then it goes on, and it's so I love the kind of gothic darkness of the book. The story, and the more you read it, the way it connects is really fascinating. There aren't a lot of linked story collections that I know that really connect quite in such a subtle way. But the first thing was definitely the writing. It's what I usually respond to in text, and it's just so strong. She has a very powerful voice, and I think your writing is really kind of restrained. It's not flashy, but it's very unique and very affecting.
Thank you, and I'm happy you liked the fog, because there is a lot of it in Fauna, and there was much more when I submitted it to my publisher, and he said, "No, you have to cut fog." Fog.
But it feels like a character. Like you always see the fog, because the fog, you have really exciting verbs. It's actually doing things, not just foggy. It's like the fog is traveling over the car and down the hill. So it really sets the tone for the book. Yeah.
No, every time the fog appeared, I was like, oh God, what's going to happen now? My nerves just started tingling right away.
Yeah, it's kind of like a horror movie, but it's not all scary. There are lighter parts as well.
No, I'd be hard pressed to call this a horror book, but I think it is a scary book in some ways.
Yeah.
I almost feel like it reminded me a little bit of like H.P. Lovecraft or someone like that, how, people are changing and the water always seems to be full of like menace and something to be avoided at all costs. So I guess my next question would be for both you, Christiane and Pablo, what was it like writing and translating a book that was so tense and scary, especially when you're doing this work both as writer and translator on your own? Did you find yourself like sort of lost in this? Did you become scared? Can you talk a bit about that?
I can say, it's strange to say that, but I felt really well in that ambience. In fact, the first story I wrote is the first one in the book, and when I found this ambience, I knew it was this way I wanted to go. And I wrote this way before the pandemic, way before COVID-19, and I already was like anxious about, of course, ecological questions, and I wanted in some way to rethink our place in this ecosystem. So I wanted to do a book about the violence of nature that we cannot dominate right now, that we see in the climate changes, but also show the magnificence of this nature and show it as something that is not easy, not cute, nor violent, just, how can we say that? Effacé.
Oh, good question. It's kind of in the background, and it's subtle. It's
I didn't want to make frontiers between humans and nature. Maybe I can say it like that. Sorry, I have Pablo there, so I want to ask him questions. But yeah, it was about. I really like there's an excerpt from Einstein at the beginning of the book that I really, really like. I feel such a sense of solidarity with all living things that it does not matter to me where the individual begins and ends. And this for me is really the project of this book. So we are in something right now, the environment, which is in crisis, and we are part of this crisis. And for me, I had no choice to talk about that. It's like it's the world we live in, this dystopia almost. I don't know if I say this word correctly, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pablo, how about you? What was it like to translate a book like this? Was it an intense process to spend so much time with
It was. Again, it was before the pandemic, thank God, and I'm actually translating another book that has a pandemic in it right now, which was also written long before. So I think the writers of the world were kind of plugged into something before the rest of us. It was, I mean, mostly it's just really nice working on a really well-written kind of book, and as it starts to come together, it's a really nice feeling. But yeah, there's a lot to think about, and like Christiane was saying, the shift of perspective away from just the characters. The characters are there and they carry the book along, but at some point they're dying in requies. And then she talks about how, what will happen to their bodies after they're decomposing, and the insects under the leaves. And so in Fauna, the perspective is really global. And by doing that, even though a lot of incredibly terrifying things happen, I think it's not really depressing. It's a kind of a hopeful book, because we have the sense that there will be this positive evolution after we've completely burned down our civilization.
Yeah, but it survives.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so some people talked to me about the book, about its ending, how its ending is kind of post-apocalyptic or something like that. But for me, in the book, you'll see there's a lot of metamorphosis, and the frontier between animals and humans is like there's no more of it or less of it. And for me, there's something really positive about this new balance. We are going toward a new balance that is not something depressing, because what would be really depressing for me is that we lose everything we have, like if our societies collapse, but also if humans doesn't survive, if all the species we are seeing that are extinct. Sorry. Yeah, if they all die too, okay. I will say that very I don't know, very bref. So I think this new balance at the end of the book is for me something positive. I don't know for you, Pablo, how you saw it, but for me it's something about the beautiful way that life survives, how we can, bacteria can survive catastrophes, how stone will survive, how there will be a world after us, and I hope with us after this.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I totally agree. And like I say, the overall, as much as it's a terrifying book, the overall feeling, it's very composed and calm, and it makes you think. And even when absolutely horrible, I mean, I think we can give away some of the things that happen. There are like lions eating people or mauling characters, and there's polar bears chasing, like there's horrible things happening and we're scared. But the overall sense when you finish the book is, for me, was like a sense of calm and of we're in a longer time frame of like biological time. So I totally agree that it is a hopeful ending, and there's something reassuring which we need a little bit of right now.
It's so interesting that you described the ending as sort of post-apocalyptic, Christiane, because I think usually when we use that term, it's always in the negative. If you think about like a the sort of the zombie type post-apocalyptic, which is just barren, but there is a lot of hope in your end of the book, in your post-apocalyptic ending. There's almost a rebirth. I remember reading an essay a long time ago about just asking why we have so much post-apocalyptic fantasy about surviving, and like how do people survive after the apocalypse. And her question was like, why would you want to? Like every time we show sort of a last man type scenario, it's horrible, right? Like, why would you want to be that person? But yours obviously shows a lot of hope or rebirth or change. I still found it scary because it was so much change, and I think there's a lot of that in fauna. Like it's a future we don't recognize. It's a humanity we don't necessarily recognize. So my original question that I was going to ask now is, in the world of fauna, you know, based around this town of Shivering Heights as the focal point, is there any way for, it doesn't seem like there's a way for people to stop what's happening. Like when we start, when we enter this world, are they already doomed to this end, do you think? Like, are we able to, in us too, are we able to change right now, like, or the world of fauna, or are we like the people in fauna, just sort of haplessly going towards this human animal post-apocalypse?
Yeah, for me, the ending is already in the beginning. Yes, the book opens with that great this diluvian, I don't know, with these great rains, and it's it's the beginning of what will arrive at the end. But for me, there is no way to escape this end in the book. But in real life, it's different. We have ways to escape, and I hope we will take them. For me, writing a literature that is changing the perspective, as Pablo told it very well, for me, it was a book about characters, but also about insects, about forests, about a strange fish that Laura is studying at the point. For me, it's all about that, and making linked stories that are all not all goes together in the same plot. For me, it was a way to do that, to have like a camera very big on this picture. And I think that doing this, putting the human inside nature and putting him like not in a dominant position, as we always do in fiction. For me, in fiction, there's like a cult of the character that is very anthropocentric for me. So I wanted to do something different. There is a strong nonfiction tradition that does that is interested in nature, but I think fiction is, in French, at least, is a little bit less interested by this. And I think we need this. We need to make people interested in the name of the little things, in all the beings that we see. When I was doing this book, I was like walking along the river near my home, and I was like seeing the trees, and I didn't know their names. I was seeing birds, I didn't know their names. And for me, this is a problem we have right now, and this is a problem that fiction can, you know, what we can do in fiction is like loving names, make people love stories about other things than humans.
That's fantastic. Pablo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I would say also that the main character, Laura, is a scientist, and throughout the book, we see her working to try and find a solution to this pandemic. And that was one of my favorite things about the book, was she is so rational, because I'm not a scientific person. She's so rational, so dedicated. And I mean, it's maybe my favorite moment in the book, and it's also the story I read first, so that might be why, but she actually is giving birth, and she doesn't want to stop working, doing her research, because she found a specimen, and she's sure it's going to help her find a cure for the pandemic. So, and then we also have the other character at the end, Lawrence, who is taking sick people and taking care of them out in the woods as they die. He knows he can't help them survive, but he finds it's enough just to kind of love them and give them care as they die. So I think in the book, we also have two examples of, you know, things we can do, neither of which are going to stop the apocalypse, but yeah.
I think one of the, you know, this book, we've been describing it as sort of a climate fiction, because I think obviously the climate is just at the center of it, and we have things like, you know, extreme weather, you know, flash floods, animals and people and collision, a pandemic, things like this. Is there any other kind of books like this, other kinds of climate fiction that you two have read, or Christiane, that inspired you, or Pablo, that you read that you really enjoyed?
I wouldn't say it inspired me because it's very different, but I really like from the Québécois Christiane Vadnais, The Weight of Snow, which is the story of two men in a home after an enigmatic catastrophe. And we just feel the tension between these men, and we see gigantic amount of snow. And what is interesting is that it's a very Québécois climate fiction because it's driven by the strangeness and of the winter. And you know, in Quebec, in North in general, winter are very magic and they seem to never end. And so this really talked to me. So yeah, that's one I would recommend.
Pablo?
Yeah, and I actually haven't read a lot of climate fiction. There's definitely a lot coming out now, but one book I am almost finished reading is The Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler, which is terrifying. It's like, because in Fauna we just have a few characters and a lot of nature, and this one it's like roving gangs, guns, but it's also like the whole West Coast is on fire, which is true right now. And it was written in the 90s, and it is a really terrifying glimpse of what was then the future that looks in many ways a lot like what I see on the West Coast right now, where you have like huge encampments of homeless people and horrible addiction problems and huge fires. And so, you know, she saw back in the 90s kind of where we were headed. And I think the writers are always ahead of everyone else in seeing things, or they have a way of making it more understandable to normal people, where scientists can see things coming, but they aren't always good at making the urgency clear to non-scientists.
That's fascinating. That's a very, very good point. I feel like even at the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much talk about, I remember distinctly hearing about 3 waves, for example, and you know, shutdowns in between. And I feel like here we are approaching the 2nd wave already, and people are surprised by it. But I think there's also a bit of frustration, like it was laid out before us the entire time, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. I don't want to keep everyone too long, but I wanted to thank you so much, both of you, both Christiane and Pablo. I'm pointing at you, respect on my screen here, for joining us tonight. Christiane, for your beautiful reading. Thank you so much. The book is Fauna. Get it, read it in bed, but maybe not too late at night. If you buy it for the next 24 hours, if you buy the book, there's a link in the chat now. And if you use the code Fauna Launch, that's all caps, 2 words, Fauna Launch, you will get 25% off the book. So that's a good deal. Get this book. It's also, again, just posted in the comments right now. I would like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I see a couple of people I know from around the world, so that's amazing. Thank you very much for joining us and for making the time. For Christiane, for writing this incredible, powerful, really important book, and Pablo, for all your hard work translating it, your eloquent, beautiful translation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.